My son forgot my 70th birthday. Then on Christmas, he and his wife gave expensive gifts to everyone but me. They thought I was old, weak, and ready to be pushed into a nursing home so they could take my $600,000 house. They were wrong. What I revealed that morning didn't just shock them. It ended their plans forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat in my living room that evening, the winter light fading across the hardwood floor I had laid down with my own hands years ago. The house was quiet. Too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and reminds you how alone you really are. This was the same house Margaret and I built our lives in. A red brick house on the edge of town, worth about $600,000 now, though to me its value had never been about money. It was about memories. It was about love. It was about the years we carved out of sacrifice. As I stared at the framed photo of our wedding still sitting above the fireplace, I couldn't help but think of the sacrifices I had made for David, my only son. I remembered writing that first check for his college tuition, $60,000. It nearly emptied my savings at the time, but I told myself it was worth it. I told myself that every parent dreams of giving their child a better start. Margaret and I tightened our belts, we stopped eating out, and we cut vacations short. She even picked up part-time work at the library just to help. David never asked where the money came from, never wondered how much we gave up. He just accepted it, like it was his right. Then came graduation. He walked across that stage with a shiny gown and a smile that filled me with pride. I thought it was the beginning of something beautiful. He wanted a car, said it would help him get to interviews, to feel like he belonged among the other young professionals. So I bought him a car. I bought $25,000. Not brand new, but close enough, gleaming under the dealership lights. I remember Margaret squeezing my hand, whispering, "George, are you sure we can afford this?" I nodded because I wanted to believe in my son's future more than I believed in my own stability. Years later, when he and Claire decided to buy their first house, they didn't have enough for the down payment. Who did they turn to? Me. I pulled out what little I had saved, thousands I had earmarked for retirement, and wrote another check. They signed the papers, moved into their house, smiled for pictures with their realtor, and not once did I hear the words, "Thank you, Dad, you saved us." Instead, I watched them move further away, both in miles and in heart. Now I sat in this room filled with pieces of my life, the leather armchair that had molded itself to my shape over decades. The coffee table I refinished by hand, the faint smell of wood stain still lingering. My red brick house, my home, wasn't just a property. It was a sanctuary. And now I had to face the brutal truth. David and Claire wanted to take it from me. They wanted to push me into a nursing home, sell this house for $600,000, and pocket the money like it was theirs to claim. The thought made my stomach twist. I ran my hand across the armrest of the chair, tracing the worn edges, the place where Margaret used to rest her knitting needles. Every corner of this house carried her touch. The rose bushes out front she insisted on planting, the curtains she sewed herself, the picture frames she filled with moments of laughter. To imagine David and Claire selling it off like just another asset on a spreadsheet, it broke something inside me. The hurt ran deeper than money. It was the relationship itself, the bond of father and son that now felt like it had been shattered beyond repair. I remembered when David was a boy, how he'd fall asleep on my chest, his little breath steady against my heartbeat. I remembered coaching his little league games, cheering for him when he struck out, telling him it didn't matter, that he'd get another chance. All of that seemed like a different life, as if those memories belonged to another family. The real breaking point came on my 70th birthday. I woke up that morning expecting, if not a visit, at least a phone call. Just a simple, "Happy birthday, Dad." I waited all day. I checked the mailbox 3 times. Nothing. By evening, I told myself maybe they had forgotten, maybe they'd call the next day. But then I opened Facebook, and my breath caught in my throat. There it was, Claire's post, a photo of her father smiling widely, standing in front of a big birthday cake. The caption read, "Happy 70th to the best dad in the world. We love you." The party looked grand. Balloons, friends, and gifts stacked on the table. My birthday was the same day. The same day. And yet my son had chosen to celebrate another man, another father, while leaving me sitting alone in the quiet. That night I sat by the window with tears streaming down my face. "Maggie," I whispered to the photo on the mantel, "they've forgotten me. They've forgotten us. But I won't let them take our house. Not this. Not what we built." My voice cracked, but my resolve began to harden. The pain turned into something sharper. It turned into anger, and beneath that anger, a seed of determination began to grow. I had been passive too long. I had let their distance, their silence, eat away at me. But no more. If they thought I was weak, if they thought age had made me powerless, they were wrong. One evening, when the house was especially still, I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside, under old tax returns and bank statements, lay a folder Margaret and I had put together years ago. The title on the front, Insurance and Property Documents. My hands trembled as I lifted it out, but when I opened it, a strange calm settled over me. There it was, the life insurance policy, untouched, and the deed to the house. My name was still there, clear as day, not David's, not Claire's, mine. I sat back, the papers spread across the desk, the lamplight casting shadows on the pages. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of power, a reminder that this wasn't theirs to take, that as long as I was breathing, this house was mine. I thought about the conversations I'd overheard, the way Claire would talk about downsizing me, how David would nod along, saying things like, "Dad will be happier with people his age." Happier? They wanted to put me in a place where I'd be parked in a corner like an old car, visited once a month out of obligation, while they cashed in on my life's work. No, that wasn't going to happen. As the night deepened, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the mantel again. I looked at the photo of Margaret, her smile frozen in time, her hand in mine. "They think I've lost my strength," I whispered, "but they don't know me. They don't know what I still have." I placed the folder on the table right next to her picture. It was more than paper. It was leverage. It was a reminder that I wasn't done yet. The anger that had once hollowed me out now gave me focus. I thought about calling Mr. Harper, my old lawyer, the man who had helped me draw up business papers back when Margaret and I ran a small repair shop. He was older now, retired maybe, but I remembered his words. "Always keep your name on what matters, George. Don't sign it away, no matter how much you trust someone." Those words echoed louder than ever. I leaned back in my chair, the papers spread around me like a shield. The house wasn't gone. My rights weren't gone, and neither was I. They thought I was too tired to fight, too old to care. But they were wrong. The game wasn't over, not by a long shot. And as I sat there, with the cold December night pressing against the windows, I knew one thing for certain. Chapter 1. Of their betrayal had been written, but the next chapter, that would be mine. "They think I'm finished," I murmured, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. "But the game is only just beginning." If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. I woke before the sun, the house still and blue, the air cool against my face. I made coffee the way I always do, 2 scoops, 1 slow stir, the steam curling up like a thin ribbon in the kitchen light. I stood there with the mug in my hands and looked out at the backyard, at the bare branches and the little patch of ground where Margaret planted her roses. I could almost hear her humming. I could almost hear her say, "George, drink your coffee while it's hot." I took a sip and felt the heat settle in my chest. It steadied me. Today wouldn't be about wishing. Today would be about doing. I carried my mug to the dining table and laid out the folder I had pulled from the desk the night before. Insurance papers. The deed. A list of accounts I had scribbled in pencil. Names, numbers, dates. I placed a yellow legal pad beside it and wrote at the top in block letters. Protect the house. Protect the money. Protect myself. I underlined each line. Then I picked up the phone and called Mr. Harper. His voice came through warm and familiar, a little older, a little slower, but still sure. "George, it's been a while." "It has," I said. "I need your help." He listened. I told him about the house, the value, the way David and Claire had been circling it like a hawk circles a field. I told him about the birthday no one remembered and the post Claire made for her father. I told him about the pressure to sell, the talk about a nursing home, the way they wrapped control in the language of care. I kept my voice even. I stuck to the facts. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he cleared his throat. "Come in this afternoon," he said. "Bring the deed. Bring any account statements you have. We'll go step by step. And George, you're not powerless here." I thanked him, hung up, and sat very still for a moment. The coffee tasted different now, brighter. I slid the deed into a plastic sleeve. I found the insurance policy and tucked it behind it. I added the last bank statement from my savings account and the small checking account where, years ago, after a knee surgery, I had allowed David to be an authorized signer, just in case. That detail bothered me now. It itched under my skin. I wrote on the legal pad, "Remove David from old checking. Open new accounts. Freeze if needed." By 9, I was dressed and out the door, the cold air biting at my cheeks. The red brick of the house glowed faintly in the morning light. I locked the door and placed my palm flat on it, an old habit, like a quiet promise between me and the home that had kept me safe for so long. "I've got you," I said under my breath. "I won't let you go." Then I walked to the car. The bank sat on the corner near the co-op, a modern building with big glass windows and a lobby that always smelled faintly of citrus and paper. A woman at the desk looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning, sir. How can we help you today?" "I need to speak with a manager," I said, "about account security." She brought me to an office where a framed certificate hung above a tidy desk. The manager introduced herself as Ms. Patel. She shook my hand firmly, invited me to sit, and asked how she could help. I put the folder on the desk, kept my voice calm, and told her what I needed. I didn't tell her about birthdays or old hurts. I told her about risk. I told her about a checking account where my son was still an authorized signer from a time when I was recovering and needed help, and how that time had passed. I told her I wanted to remove him immediately. I told her I wanted to open a new money market account in my name only and transfer $200,000 into it. I told her I wanted a password on the account and a note in my file. No phone transactions, no exceptions, in person only, with photo ID. She nodded and took notes. "We can do all of that," she said. "We'll also set up a verbal password and add a security question that only you would know." "Make the security phrase Maggie's Garden," I said. Capital M, capital G, no apostrophes. She smiled. "Done." She printed forms, explained them slowly, and watched as I read every line. I did not rush. I initialed where she pointed. I signed where she placed tabs. Then she looked up at me with a question that surprised me with its kindness. "Do you want a safe deposit box for your documents?" "Yes," I said without thinking. "Yes, I do." She walked me to the vault, showed me a small metal drawer, and handed me 2 keys. Inside, I placed a certified copy of the deed that I had picked up years ago, the insurance policy, and a short typed list of my new accounts. I kept the originals with me. I closed the drawer and felt something unlock inside me. A small thing, but real. Control. Back in her office, Ms. Patel clicked through screens. "I see a note here, Mr. Whitman. There was a call 2 weeks ago asking about balances on the older accounts. Our system shows the caller passed basic verification." I felt my jaw tighten. "Who called?" She glanced at the screen. "A male voice. The number ends in 4482. David's number ends in 4482. I did not say his name. I nodded instead. Please put a note, I said. No balances over the phone, no discussions about my accounts with anyone. If there's a question, you call me at this number, and you ask for the security phrase. If I don't answer, you do nothing. We'll do that, she said. Is there anything else? Yes, I said, and surprised myself again with how steady I sounded. Is there a way to flag my file so that if anyone tries to add themselves as an authorized user, the system requires me to be physically present? She nodded. We can require in-person notarized forms with your signature and ID. I'll set that now. When I left the bank, the day felt different. The light looked cleaner. The air didn't press as hard. I sat in the car and let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. Then I drove to the county office. The Register of Deeds sits in an old stone building off Pack Square, the kind of place that makes you lower your voice without being told. I asked for certified copies of my deed. The clerk printed them, ran them through a machine that stamped a seal deep into the paper, and slid them across the counter. I paid in cash. I put one certified copy into the folder and another into an envelope labeled, "For Mr. Harper." The paper felt heavy in my hands. Solid. Mine. At 2, I walked into Harper's office. The waiting room smelled like leather and dust and the faint trace of coffee that had sat a little too long on a hot plate. He came to get me himself. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, but not softer. Time had sharpened him. We sat across from each other at his desk, the afternoon sun cutting a bright line across a neat stack of folders. He picked up a pen. "All right," he said. "Tell me everything." I told him, this time in the order he needed to hear it. I told him the value of the house. I told him about the old checking account and the steps I had taken that morning. I told him about the pressure to sell. I told him about the talk at a nursing home. I told him about the way David and Claire treated me like a piece of furniture they needed to move to make room for their plans. I kept my voice even. I did not cry. I watched his pen move. "We're going to do 3 things," he said. 1, we're going to create a revocable living trust. You will be the trustee. You will control it as long as you're alive and competent. We'll name a successor trustee of your choosing. 2, we'll deed the house from you, George Whitman, to the Whitman Living Trust. That removes easy access for anyone trying to push a sale behind your back. 3, we'll update your will and your powers of attorney so that the people who actually protect your interests are in place. If you do not want David to act for you, then he won't. He slid a draft document toward me with a blank line where the successor trustee's name should go. "Who do you trust?" he asked. The question hung in the room. I thought of my granddaughter, Emily. I thought of her messages, her small kindness. I thought of her steady eyes. "Emily," I said, "with a professional backup, a trust company, in case she's too young or too busy." "Good," he said. "We'll add both. We'll also give the trustee clear instructions. No sale of the house without your written consent while you're alive. No transfer to anyone who pressures you. We'll add language about undue influence. And George, we'll keep you in control." We spent 2 hours going line by line. He explained each paragraph. I asked questions. We adjusted the language so it sounded like me, not a stranger. When we were done, he called his paralegal, a woman named Teresa with quick hands and kind eyes, and asked her to prepare the deed to the trust and a simple letter to my bank confirming the trust's existence. He also printed a letter to David and Claire. It was calm. It was precise. It said in clear language that I was safe in my home, that I had no plans to sell, that any further pressure about moving into a nursing home would be considered harassment, and that all communications about my property should be directed to my attorney. He slid the letter across the desk. "You don't have to send this today," he said, "but I want you to read it." I read it. I didn't send it. Not yet. Timing matters. We signed what could be signed. We set a notary appointment for the morning for the deed. I asked him about recording. He told me he would file it immediately after the notary stamp. He told me once it was recorded, there would be a public record. Anyone trying to list the property would run into the trust. He told me that a listing agreement without the trustee's signature would be worthless. I felt a weight lifted that I had carried like a backpack full of rocks. When I left Harper's office, the day had slipped toward evening. The sidewalks glowed with the last light. I drove home the long way, past Margaret's favorite bakery and the little bookstore where we used to lose hours together. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car with the engine off. The house stood in front of me, quiet and sure. I felt a steady hum in my ribs, like I had grabbed a live wire and learned to hold it without fear. I was not done. There was more to do. Inside, I made myself a simple dinner. Soup, a slice of bread. I rinsed the bowl and set it in the drying rack. Then I went to my desk and opened my laptop. I looked at my blog dashboard. There it was. A small number, 100 reads on the latest post. It wasn't much in the world's eyes. To me, it was a room full of people listening. I felt proud. I felt a little boyish. A small thrill ran through me, and I did something naive. I picked up the phone and called David. He answered on the fourth ring. His voice sounded like it always does now. Busy, clipped, distracted. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" "I wanted to share something," I said. "My latest piece got 100 reads today. 100. And the comments, they said it helped them. They said they felt seen." He didn't even let me finish. "Dad, you're wasting your time. You're not a blogger. You're 72. You need a plan, not projects." Claire and I think the best thing is to sell the house, get you into a good place where people can look after you. You'll be safer. You'll have friends. We can manage the house and the money. It's the responsible thing. The words hit hard, not a surprise. Still, they hit. I watched my hand tighten on the phone. I felt the slow burn behind my eyes. I swallowed. "I hear you," I said, and kept my voice even. "Thanks for your thoughts." I ended the call before he could say more. My heart pounded. The room felt small, and then it slowly grew back to its shape. I placed the phone on the desk and stared at the wall. I let the heat move through me, not around me. I let it make a line instead of a fire. "He thinks I'm finished," I said out loud to the quiet. "He thinks I'm broken." I took a breath, long and low. He's wrong. I opened the drawer and took out a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote, in thick pen strokes, "The plan." Under it, I wrote the steps I had taken. Bank, deed, trust, powers, safe deposit. Then I wrote what still needed doing. Credit freezes, change beneficiaries, two-factor authentication on email and financial accounts. New passwords are written on paper, not stored in the computer. A second key to the safe deposit box that Emily could access if needed. I wrote each item in its own line, with a small square beside it. I checked off what I had finished. I circled what needed help. I went online and placed credit freezes with all 3 bureaus: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. Each site asked questions from my past, strange little pop quizzes about old addresses and loans and cars I never owned. I moved slowly. I answered carefully. When each freeze was confirmed, I wrote the pins down in neat letters and put the paper in the folder. Then I called the insurance company and asked to confirm beneficiaries. I asked for a mailed letter. I asked for no changes by phone. I asked for a note in my file that no agent should discuss anything with anyone but me. The agent spoke in the gentle tone they use with the elderly. I let him. I got what I needed. The next morning, I met Harper and Teresa at the office of a notary down the hall. We signed the deed to the Whitman Living Trust. The notary stamped it loudly, the sound like a gavel on a small bench. Teresa took the papers in a red folder and said she would walk them to the Register of Deeds right then. "We'll courier the recorded copy back to you," she said. "Keep it safe." "I will," I said. Back home, I made a small ceremony of it. I cleared the dining table, opened the folder, and laid out the documents I had collected in the last 24 hours. The certified copy of the deed. The trust documents, still warm from the printer. The updated will. The durable power of attorney did not name David. The healthcare directive named my doctor and a neighbor, Carl, a calm man who had fixed my fence last spring and had sat with me on the porch many evenings since. I added the bank forms that confirmed the new account and the removal of David as an authorized signer on the old one. I added a single-page letter Harper's office had drafted confirming the existence of the trust. Then, on top of the stack, I placed a large manila envelope. On the front, I wrote, in my steady print, Christmas. Do not open until Christmas morning. I slid inside another set of papers I had printed and stapled myself. A small report from my blog dashboard. The last quarter's earnings. $36,800 after expenses. A list of my subscribers, first names only, no emails shown. A note about the holiday feature we'd been invited to by a small magazine for older adults. Nothing showy, just facts. I did not add explanations. I did not add defense. I let the numbers speak. I sealed the envelope. I placed it in my jacket pocket. I stood there for a long time, feeling the weight. It wasn't heavy. It felt like a key. That afternoon, Claire called. She wanted to talk about next steps. She said a friend of hers knew a realtor who could list my house fast, get top dollar, and bring in offers above asking in a week. She said we needed to move quickly before the market shifted. I listened. I kept my voice mild. I asked for the agent's name. I asked for the listing agreement to be emailed to me, just to review. I told her I was open. She sounded pleased. She sounded triumphant in a small, careful way. I let her have it. Timing matters. After the call, I forwarded the email to Harper. He responded within minutes. Do not sign, he wrote. The trust shields you. If she pushes, we'll send the letter. I wrote back, not yet. He answered with one word, understood. In the evening, I walked through the rooms. I touched the door frames. I ran my palm along the banister I had sanded and stained and sealed one long summer when my knees were younger. I stopped at the mantel and looked at our wedding photo again. Margaret's smile stayed soft in the glass. I placed my fingertips against it like a blessing. They think I've lost, I whispered. They think I'm tired, but I'm not. Not yet. I slept well for the first time in weeks. The next day, I met with Ms. Patel again and asked to add another layer of protection, a code word that would have to be spoken in person for any large transfer. She obliged. I chose a word that only Margaret and I had ever used for each other, something small and private that would never appear on a form. I wrote it down and placed it in the folder. Then I went to the post office and rented a small P.O. box for certain mail, the kind you don't want lying in a curbside mailbox where anyone can lift the flag and look inside. I gave the number to Harper's office, to the bank, and to the insurance company for sensitive documents only. The clerk handed me a key. I felt again that light click inside my chest. Step by step. When I got home, a message waited on the answering machine. David. He sounded cheerful, like a man about to close a deal. He said their friend, the realtor, could stop by on Saturday to walk the house. He said it would be easy. He said they would handle everything. His voice had that speed to it that meant he felt in control. I erased the message. Then I called him back. I'll be here Saturday, I said. Come by. He thanked me, called me Dad, with a tone he uses for show, and hung up. I stood in the kitchen and watched a thin line of sunlight crawl across the floor. I felt the house breathing with me, in, out, in, out. I went to the table and opened the folder one more time just to see the papers, just to feel the truth of them. Then I closed it, returned it to the drawer, and locked it. Saturday came clear and cold. David and Claire arrived with the realtor, a woman with glossy hair and high heels that clicked against the hardwood. She spoke in bright sentences. She used words like cozy, great bones, and solid comps. She talked about painting over the worn patches, about staging the living room, about removing dated touches. She gestured at the mantel like it was an offense. I smiled and nodded, and said I would think about it. I made coffee. I let them walk the house. I kept my jacket on. I kept the envelope against my chest. When they left, Claire squeezed my arm in a way that was meant to seem tender. "You'll see," she said. "This is for the best." I closed the door behind them and leaned my forehead against it for a moment. Then I laughed. Quiet, quick, not unkind, just sure. On Monday, Harper's office sent word. The deed to the trust had been recorded. The house now belonged to the Whitman Living Trust with me as trustee. Any sale would require my signature as trustee. Any agent who tried to list without it would find their contract unenforceable. Teresa attached a scan of the recorded deed. The county seal looked beautiful. I printed it and placed it with the others. In the afternoon, I changed the locks, not because I feared they would walk in, because I wanted the sound of a new key turning in a new cylinder. I chose a sturdy deadbolt. I turned the screwdriver slowly, enjoying the simple work of metal and wood. When I finished, I slid the key into my pocket beside the envelope. 2 small pieces of metal, 2 very different kinds of protection. I labeled a spare and placed it in a small envelope with Emily's name on it. I did not mail it, not yet. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter to myself. It sounds strange, maybe, but it helped. I wrote, "George, you did what you could today. You protected what matters. You kept your voice. You chose timing over fury. Keep going." I signed it and tucked it into the folder. I slept hard and woke ready. The days that followed had a strange calm. Claire texted me 3 times with gentle pressure. The realtor called and left a message about a timeline. David sent a photo of a beautiful senior community with smiling people in matching polo shirts. I answered none of it. I watered the plants. I went to the grocery store and chose oranges that felt heavy in my hand. I shuffled the big envelope in my jacket each morning, feeling its shape, reminding myself of the plan. I walked at the park and let the cold air clear me. When the worry rose, I breathed it down with one steady thought. You are in control. On Friday, I drove back to Harper's office to pick up originals and to sign one more document he recommended. A simple letter of instruction to the bank, authorizing them to speak to him about any account of mine if something seemed off. Not a power of attorney, not control, just permission to ask and to inform. He explained it would help if the pressure became aggressive. I signed it. I shook his hand. "Remember," he said, "silence is a strategy. You don't owe them a debate." "I know," I said. "Thank you." On the way home, I stopped at the bookstore. I bought a new journal with a green cover and a sturdy spine. On the first page, I wrote one sentence. "They don't know what I'm carrying." I let the period sit dark. That evening, as the light faded, I stood at the window and watched the neighbor kids ride their bikes in little loops on the cul-de-sac. Their laughter rose and fell like a song. I thought about David at that age, his cheeks flushed, his hair plastered to his forehead, the way he would look back to make sure I was watching. My chest squeezed, but the movement passed. I looked up at Margaret's picture. "Maggie," I whispered, "I miss you, but I think you'd be proud. I'm not rolling over. I'm not handing over the keys to our life. I'm doing this the way you would. Quiet, firm, no drama, just steps." The phone rang. Claire. I let it go to voicemail, then played it on speaker. The sound was small in the room. She used that careful voice, the one that sounds like a blanket with a brick inside. She said she hoped I had had time to think. She said the realtor had a buyer lined up, someone who could move fast. She said she would come by Sunday to pick up the spare key, just in case they needed to show it quickly. I paused the message. I pressed delete. They were confident. They were sure of their power. They had no idea. Before bed, I opened the drawer and took out the manila envelope. I peeled back the flap and checked the contents one more time. The trust copy, the bank confirmations, the recorded deed scan, my small blog report. I added one more page I had printed that afternoon, a simple one-page summary Harper had drafted in large type with short lines, the kind you can read in one glance. Title: George Whitman's Property and Financial Protections. Under it, 3 points. House titled to Whitman Living Trust. Bank accounts secured with in-person authentication only. All property decisions are to be made by me as trustee. It ended with a line that read, Questions. Speak to Attorney Benjamin Harper with his number. I slipped the page in and resealed the flap. I slid the envelope back into my jacket pocket and patted it once. It made the smallest sound, paper against paper. It sounded like a promise. I turned off the lights, checked the locks, and stood for a moment in the dark near the window. The house felt awake with me. The quiet didn't press like it used to. It sat beside me like an old friend who doesn't need words. I breathed in. I breathed out. Then I spoke softly into the room. They think I've already lost. They think I'm easy to move, but they're wrong. The next part is theirs to see. I went to bed with that line in my head like a steady drum. I slept well. In the morning, I packed an overnight bag and placed it by the door. Not because I was leaving, because I like being ready. I brewed coffee. I toasted bread. I checked the sky. The forecast promised clear, cold days ahead. I thought of Christmas. I thought of the tree in their living room, the lights, the careful boughs, the way they would make a show of everything. I thought of the moment their laughter would change shape. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply set a plate in the sink and reached for my jacket. The envelope waited where I had left it, the edges square, the paper warm from the heat of the room. I slid it into the inside pocket and felt again how light it was. A thin thing, a small thing, but enough. They didn't know I had it. They didn't know what it meant. They didn't know what I had already done. They would, soon. They don't know. I've got the thing that will change everything. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. Christmas morning was crisp and bright, the kind of winter sun that makes porches shine and breath hang like pale smoke. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment with the engine off, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting over the inside pocket of my jacket. The manila envelope lay flat against my chest like a quiet heartbeat. I could feel the edge of the condo key through the paper. I whispered to Margaret the way I always do when I need a steadier hand. "Maggie, I am going in. I will be calm." Claire opened the door before I knocked. Cinnamon was in the air, sugar on top of something mostly for show. Her smile was wide and careful. David hovered in the background with his phone, thumb moving even as he said hello. I carried a basket with small gifts, a candle for Emily that smelled like spruce after rain, a book about maps for Jason because he used to trace highways with his finger on the atlas at my house, a simple leather notebook for David, a soft kitchen towel for Claire in the exact shade of green she likes to photograph. I stepped into the living room, and the first thing I noticed was how clean it all felt. White brick fireplace, a tall tree dressed in silver and white. The ornaments reflected the room itself. The floor looked too soft to be walked on. I put the basket by the tree and kept my coat on. Claire clapped her hands and told the kids to start. Jason dove first, as boys do, tearing paper like it had wronged him. Boxes piled up around him in neat towers, a gaming headset, a smartwatch, a stack of gift cards held together by a ribbon. Emily opened a slim laptop and hugged David, a genuine hug that made my throat tight for a second. Claire held up a designer handbag for the camera, the logo turned toward the light. David opened a sleek golf bag and posed with it as if he had already won a tournament he never entered. Photos were taken. Captions were drafted out loud. I sat and watched. The floor is filled with ribbon and plastic. The tree lights flickered like thoughts. The dog chased a candy cane under the table and came up empty because Claire had already scooped it away. The volume fell to that warm hum a room makes after a storm. Claire looked toward the corner near my shoes. She tilted her head and asked, in a bright voice meant to carry, whether one gift had gone missing behind the tree skirt. David stared into his coffee. Emily stared at the ribbon in her hands. Jason looked at me and said it lightly, like a line from a show he had seen, a line he hoped would land the way jokes land on television. "Grandpa's used to it." The room let out a ripple of laughter, the harmless kind people practice when the harm is the point. The heat in my chest rose fast, the way winter air burns when you breathe it too deep. I set the feeling down like a heavy tool. Not now. I looked at the tree. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I looked at the envelope in my jacket and felt the calm of paper and ink and the simple weight of a key. I waited until the room had gone quiet again, the way a stage goes quiet after a line that does not land. Then I cleared my throat. "Actually," I said, and my voice surprised me with how gentle it sounded. "I brought something. It is for me, but it concerns all of us." I reached into my jacket, took out the manila envelope, and laid it on the coffee table. The paper made a whisper against the wood. I did not look at anyone as I slid my thumb under the flap and opened it. David made that half laugh he uses when he wants to test whether a thing is serious. Claire folded her arms, one nail tapping the fabric of her sleeve. Jason leaned back, then forward, curiosity fighting with pride. Emily sat up straighter like a student who wants to hear without looking too eager. I lifted out the first packet, 4 pages, plain white paper, black letters, facts. "This is my last quarter's report," I said. From my work, I placed it on the table where the light could touch it. "Income after expenses, $38,000. I said it clean. Not loud, not shy. The number rang like a bell hung in a quiet hallway. No one moved. "That is in 3 months, I added. From my blog and my little shop, from people who read and buy. Claire's mouth opened and closed once. David's thumbs stopped. Jason leaned in before he remembered to lean away. Emily whispered the number under her breath, not to test it, but to feel it on her tongue. "My work," I said again. "Second wind stories. I write every week. I sell printable journals and short guides. The costs are small. The hours are mine." I slid out the second page and tapped the top line. "Newsletter subscribers. A little $5 letter on Fridays, 1,200 and some. It moves, but it holds." I slid out a third sheet. "Readership. 80,000 readers last month. Not a viral wave, not a trick. Real people. Steady." I slid out the fourth. "Shop orders. Thousands this year. December was busy. A magazine for older adults featured my work, and a podcast had me on. Nothing fancy, just honest talk. It helped." Claire laughed once, brittle, and changed the sound into the word interesting. She said something unexpected. She said inspiring. Each word tried on like a dress returned to the rack after a look in a mirror. David stared at me as if I had worn a mask for years and only now lifted it an inch. He leaned forward, voice low like a man trying to put a fence around a fire. "Dad," he said, "how long have you been hiding this?" "Since the day you stopped calling," I said. The sentence did not shout. It did not need to. It sat squarely between us like a brick we would both have to walk around now. His eyes flicked to Claire, then back to me, as if her face could translate mine. I reached into the envelope again and brought out the small silver key. I set it beside the papers. It looked modest. It did not announce itself. "This is my new place," I said. 2 bedrooms, downtown Asheville, good light. I closed last week. $250,000, paid with my own funds. I will be where I choose, not where I am placed. Claire's head moved back the tiniest bit, like a person touched by a breeze in a still room. Her recovery was quick. She tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled the way people do when they shift to strategy. She said we could make something together. She said the word brand with the soft buzz people use when they think they are offering gold. She talked about her company's newsletter and their friends in marketing. She used the word scale, the word family, and the word platform. It was sales talk dressed as care. "No," I said. One word, clean. I let it rest and then added, "You have not wanted me. You have wanted what I could give. Those are different things. I will not confuse them again. I am not inventory. I am not content. I am a person. David began to talk faster. He said I was misunderstanding. He said they were only trying to help me make smart choices while I still could. He said the market was peaking, that a quick sale would maximize value, and that we should simplify everything before it got complicated. He explained taxes as if I had never paid them. He explained aging as if I had not been doing it in this body day by day. He explained my life to me like a man who needed to hear himself in control. "Stop," I said. The word was steady. "Do you know why there is no sign in my yard? Do you know why your realtor friend could not list my house when she tried?" He frowned, confused, then angry at being confused. I took out a single page Teresa had designed for me with large type and short lines. I read each line like it was a rule posted at the edge of a pool. "The house is in the Whitman Living Trust. I am the trustee. Any sale requires my signature. Bank accounts are secured in person only. A passphrase only I know." I placed the paper on top of the stack like a lid. He said my name the way he used to say it when he was little and wanted a different answer. He said we were making a scene. He said we should talk privately. He said these were family matters. His voice broke at the edges. He had not planned for fog. Claire went pale around the mouth. Jason stared at the papers with a new and complicated attention. Emily looked at me with a look I am not sure I deserve, something like pride. "Dad," David said again, gentler, trying a new approach, "you could have told us. You could have trusted us with this." "I tried to tell you many things," I said. "You did not hear. I am not hiding. I am living. That is the difference." Claire took the business card from the stack and turned it over in her hands. She read the line that directed all property questions to my attorney. She read the sentence that said further pressure to relocate would be considered harassment. She repeated the word harassment quietly, as if she could file its corners down by saying it twice. She told me I was overreacting. She told me no one was pushing me. She told me I was imagining intent where there was only love. I looked at the place on the carpet where her words fell without weight. "Claire," I said, calm as if we were in the kitchen washing dishes together after Sunday lunch, "if you had wanted me, you would have wanted me when there was nothing to display. You wanted control of the house and the money. I will not pretend otherwise." David rose too fast, and his chair scraped the floor like a bad chord. He paced. He said he had a buyer lined up. He said a number he thought would tempt me. He said we could bypass all the paperwork by doing what families do and trusting each other. He said there was no reason to make it a fight. He built a little tower of words and pushed me to live inside it. I shook my head. "Call your buyer," I said. "Tell them the trustee declines." He went still then, the stillness of a man who just ran into a door he believed would open. Claire pulled out her phone and typed. She waited. Her shoulders dropped the smallest degree. She showed David the reply. He swallowed. He did not look at me. The room had shifted its weight. The perfect tree did not look perfect anymore. It looked like an effort. Jason spoke then, soft, like he had been saving the sentence in his pocket and decided to spend it. He said he was sorry about what he had said earlier. He said it without looking at anyone but the floor. I told him I appreciated it. Emily reached across and rested her fingers on the edge of the coffee table near the papers, as if to say, "I see this. I see you." The gesture was enough. I gathered the pages and slid them back into the envelope, careful and slow. I put the condo key in my palm and let it catch the light for one more second before it disappeared into my pocket. I stood. My knees made the small sound knees make when they have lived a while and remember it. I looked at my son. I looked at his wife. I let a full breath in and a full breath out. "I came today because I wanted to be family," I said. "I am leaving because I am a free man." Those two things should have lived in the same house. They do not here. Emily stood with me and asked if she could walk me to the door. She hugged me, tight, real, none of that careful shoulder touch people use when they think affection is contagious. She whispered that she would visit in the spring. I told her the porch light would be on. Claire said this was all a misunderstanding. David said I was choosing strangers on the internet over my own blood. I said I was choosing the people who show up. I opened the door, and the cold reached for my ankles like a brook. The sky was bright and clean. I walked to my car and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel and that envelope close to my chest. Messages came in while I backed down the driveway. I turned the radio to the jazz station and let a horn draw a long line through the air. I drove north with the sun slanting low and gold on the highway. Back in Asheville, the house looked like itself again. Not a thing to be priced, but a place. I hung my jacket on its hook and heard the small thud of the envelope settling against wood. I left it there. I walked the rooms and touched the places my life had worn smooth, the banister that fit my palm, the arm of the chair where Margaret used to rest her knitting when she laughed, the window that sticks in summer and slides easily in winter. The house breathed with me. In, out, in, out. I put water on for tea. While the water cooled a little, my phone buzzed. Emily. She said she was proud of me. She said she would like to learn how I lay out the journals, how I make the covers look simple but full. She asked if I would teach her at my kitchen table. I told her I would be honored. I told her we would use the same table where her grandmother once rolled out pie crust and measured fabric with a wooden yardstick and said, "Measure twice, because kindness gives you room to fix what you cut wrong." David called again and left a message full of words that sounded like pieces of a plan that no longer existed. He said we needed to meet and reset. He said we could find a middle ground. He said lawyers make things worse. He said a lot that did not land anywhere. Claire texted a paragraph about love and intention. She said I had misread them. She said we could start fresh if I would promise to be open-minded about the house in the new year. I set the phone face down and listened to the kettle tick as it cooled. I poured the tea and carried it to the table. I looked at the mantel and the wedding photo and the soft eyes that had steadied me for decades. Maggie, we did it. We kept what was ours. We kept the life. The tea burned going down, and I welcomed the burn. It felt like proof that I was here. I took out my green journal and wrote a single line. They thought I was weak. Now they see consequences. I put a period at the end because the period mattered. I closed the book and set it beside the envelope like two stones holding down a map. I was ready to live on my terms. No more waiting ever. I knew there would be fallout. People do not let go of plans quietly when those plans were built on someone else's life. There will be calls and explanations and new stories told to make the old story feel less cold. That is fine. I have paper. I have ink. I have keys. I have work that fills my mornings and notes from strangers who feel like friends because they write about grief and hope in the same sentence and mean both. I have a condo with good light and a house with a lock that turns smoothly and sure. Before bed, I wrote one more note on a card and slipped it into the manila envelope. This is not revenge. This is respect. I touched the flap and felt the rough paper under my palm, the way you feel the grain of a well-made table. I turned off the lights and cracked the bedroom window a little to let in the cold. The house settled and breathed. I slept. Morning will bring more noise. There will be talk of what a father owes and what a son deserves, as if those are simple lines you can draw with a ruler. There will be people who say, I should have smiled and given in. There will be people who say, I should have shouted louder. I am not interested in their scales. I am interested in standing and staying human. That feeling of being dismissed by your own family, of being told you are a problem to be moved, is hard, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves to be seen and respected, comment the word justice. Now watch what they do to change that, and watch what I choose next. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. When I woke the morning after Christmas, the house felt lighter than it had in years. The tension that had haunted the corners seemed to have walked out with me the night before. I brewed my coffee slowly, the way Margaret used to, letting the steam fill the kitchen and curl like a soft flag of peace. My jacket still hung by the door with the manila envelope tucked in its inside pocket. I reached in, pulled out the documents, and laid them flat on the table. The deed, the trust papers, the bank confirmation, all of it was mine, secured. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I wasn't standing on shifting sand. That same afternoon, I drove to my lawyer's office. Mr. Harper shook my hand firmly, his eyes sharper than his years. Together, we finalized the transfer of everything I owned into the Whitman Living Trust. No son, no daughter-in-law, no eager realtor could touch it now. The red brick house worth $600,000 sat safe under my name. The accounts were sealed tight. I signed the papers slowly, almost ceremonially, because every stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming pieces of myself. When Harper looked at me and said, "George, you've locked it down. No one but you has authority," I felt taller in my chair. 2 days later, I stood in the middle of a smaller but sunlit apartment overlooking Pack Square Park in downtown Asheville. 2 bedrooms, good light, a balcony where I could watch the trees shift with the seasons. $250,000, fully paid, mine alone. I carried in a single box to start, the one with Margaret's photograph, my green journal, and a worn quilt we'd kept since the early years. I spread the quilt over the couch, leaned the photograph on the mantel, and whispered, "Maggie, we've come home again. Not the old one, but one I chose with clear eyes." The view each morning soothed me. Joggers circled the park, children chased pigeons, and the sound of a saxophone drifted up from a street musician who played like the world wasn't watching. I began to write more. Not just my blog posts, but pages for myself, reflections on aging, on dignity, on the strange mix of love and betrayal that families carry. My newsletter grew quickly. People wrote back with stories of their own children, of broken trust, of late-life freedom. I started an online mentoring class for older adults who wanted to write their stories too. A dozen students became 30. 30 became 50. We met on screens, each in our small squares, each carrying a lifetime. I guided them with patience, and in guiding them, I felt guided myself. Meanwhile, the whispers about David and Claire spread faster than they imagined. Friends who once admired their polished holiday photos now spoke differently. At church, one neighbor asked David quietly why his father had been left out of the family gathering. At Claire's office, a coworker mentioned the blog she had stumbled upon, mine, and raised an eyebrow at the stories I had written about respect and inheritance. The words were not cruel, but they pressed, and soon David and Claire found themselves defending what could not be defended. I heard from a mutual friend that David's finances had started to strain. The new car, the bigger mortgage, the trips they had posted online, all of it cost more than he earned. He had counted on the house sale, counted on that $600,000 falling into his hands. Without it, the numbers did not add up. Claire tried to spin it differently, telling her circle that I was confused, that I had been misled by outside voices. But every attempt to justify only dug the hole deeper. Reputation is fragile. Once cracked, it never recovers the same. I, on the other hand, felt a freedom I hadn't tasted since Margaret was alive. I woke with purpose. I wrote. I cooked simple meals, eggs with herbs on toast, soups with vegetables from the farmer's market. I walked the park in the afternoons, greeting strangers until they became acquaintances, then friends. One retired teacher brought her dog each day. We would sit on the bench and share stories about our grandchildren. A widower who carved wood invited me to his workshop, and I found myself sanding edges on a rocking chair just for the pleasure of feeling the grain under my fingers. The contrast between my life and theirs was not lost on me. Where I had peace, they had whispers. Where I had stability, they had strain. Where I had chosen respect, they clung to appearances. It was never about me winning and them losing. It was about me choosing dignity when they offered control. But still, the irony was sharp. David called once, his voice carrying both pride and desperation. He asked if we could reset, if I might consider adding his name to the trust so things would be simpler when the time came. I let him speak without interrupting, then answered slowly, "David, the time that mattered was when you could have stood by me as a son. That time is gone. I don't need your reset." I heard his breath catch, and then the line went silent. Claire texted an apology days later. It read like something rehearsed, full of words like misunderstanding and love. I stared at the screen and felt nothing stir in me. I set the phone face down and went back to my tea. Sometimes silence is the most honest reply. I knew then that the chapter with them was closed, not with anger, not even with grief, but with boundaries as clear as ink on paper. I did not need to shout. I did not need to argue. I simply refused to step back into the cage they had built for me. Evenings became my sanctuary. I sat on the balcony, journal on my lap, and wrote lines that felt like scripture to my own heart. Family is not ownership, it is respect. Another night. Trust is not inherited, it is earned. And another. Character is the only inheritance no one can steal. Each sentence, simple as it was, lifted a stone off my chest. The students in my mentoring group began to quote my words back to me. One wrote, "George, when you said, 'We are not too old to start again,' it gave me courage to apply for a part-time job I thought I couldn't handle." Another wrote, "Your story about your son reminded me that I am not alone in being betrayed." I cried, but it was a good cry. In their responses, I found community. In their voices, I found healing. Meanwhile, David and Claire moved into a smaller rental after their finances slipped. Their friends grew distant. They posted less online. One evening, Emily visited me at the condo. She hugged me long, her head against my shoulder, and whispered, "Grandpa, I see now. I see everything. I want to learn from you, not from them." Her words were balm. I poured her hot chocolate, and we sat together, looking out over the park lights. It struck me then how betrayal, as deep as it cuts, can carve out space for new beginnings. Their failure to honor me had forced me to honor myself. Their greed had sharpened my sense of what really matters. My victory was not only keeping the house or securing the money. My victory was peace. My victory was self-respect. I thought of parents everywhere who hand over everything, houses, savings, control, thinking it will buy love. I whispered to myself, "Don't give away what defines you. If they don't respect you, no gift will make them start." I thought of children who treat their parents like burdens or accounts to be managed. "Don't measure your father or mother in dollars," I whispered. "Measure them in sacrifice, in laughter, in the hands that carried you." And I thought of humanity itself, how easy it is in this modern world to forget roots. Money shouts, appearance is blind, but character, that quiet strength, remains when everything else falls. I wrote it down in my journal that night. In a world that forgets, let me remember that dignity is my final wealth. Schaaf moiti, the days stretched into weeks, each one steadier than the last. My blog has passed 100,000 readers. My mentoring course filled faster than I expected. People sent letters, real letters in envelopes, telling me how my story had reminded them of their own worth. Some enclosed $5, some $10, but it was never the amount. It was the gesture, the recognition, the proof that my life still touched others. David tried once more to apologize in person. He showed up at the condo unannounced, his eyes tired, his hands restless. He began with, "Dad, I'm sorry," but I stopped him gently. I said, "David, I don't need an apology. I need respect. And if you cannot give that, then there is nothing left to say." He stood there, words failing him, until he turned and walked away. That door, too, closed softly but firmly. I no longer feared their schemes. I no longer feared their silence. My boundaries were clear. My trust was secure. My life was mine. One evening, as I prepared supper, a letter slid under my door. Emily's handwriting danced across the envelope. Inside was a note. "Grandpa, when can I sit at your table and learn how to write? I want to hear your stories and maybe tell my own." My eyes misted. I placed the letter on the mantel next to Margaret's photo. "You see, Maggie," I whispered, "from the ashes, something good grows." I sat that night with the window open, the sound of leaves rustling in the park. My tea steamed in the lamplight. I wrote my final words of the day in my journal. I don't need them anymore. I have myself, and that is enough. And with that, Chapter 5 of my life closed, not with bitterness, but with a quiet triumph. The storm had passed. The air was clear. What remained was mine, my dignity, my peace, and the promise of what comes next. The first few weeks in my new apartment passed quietly, almost tenderly, like the gentle hush that comes after a storm. Each morning, I woke with sunlight spilling across the floorboards, warming the quilt Margaret had stitched so many years ago. From my balcony, I could see the park across the street, children running in circles, young couples sipping coffee on benches, older men like me reading the newspaper under the shade of trees. It was life in motion, and for the first time in a long while, I felt part of it rather than pushed to the side. I settled into a rhythm. Mornings were for writing. My blog grew steadily, the comments section filling with voices of strangers who sounded more like friends. They told me their own stories, betrayals by siblings, children who had turned cold, neighbors who had stepped in when family stepped out. Each story reminded me that I wasn't alone, that the ache of being dismissed or betrayed was something many carried. By sharing mine, I permitted them to share theirs. Afternoons were for walking in the park or sitting at the cafe downstairs, where the owner soon knew my order by heart. Black coffee, no sugar, but a slice of banana bread on the side. Evenings, I taught online classes to seniors who wanted to write their memoirs. Their faces flickered across my laptop screen, glowing in their small squares, eager, tentative, brave. In helping them tell their stories, I felt I was still living mine with purpose. The weight of betrayal began to lift, piece by piece, replaced with something lighter. Freedom. Margaret would have smiled at that. I often found myself talking to her photograph on the mantel, as if she were still sitting in her favorite chair, knitting scarves for winter. "Maggie," I whispered one evening, "we made it through. They thought they had me cornered, but here I am. We kept our dignity." David and Claire, on the other hand, weren't faring so well. Word got back to me, as it always does in small circles. They had moved out of their large suburban house into a smaller rented apartment. Friends who once flocked to their dinner parties now kept their distance. Whispers of their treatment of me, how they had tried to push me into a nursing home just to seize the $600,000 house, spread quickly. People judged them more harshly than I ever could. Their social circles shrank, and their names were no longer spoken with admiration, but with pity or quiet disapproval. One afternoon, I found a letter slipped under my apartment door. The handwriting was David's, familiar but shaky. Inside, he wrote that he was sorry, that he had lost his way, that he had only been trying to secure a better future for his family. He asked if we could meet for coffee, start over, maybe find a way back. For a long moment, I held that letter in my hand. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to believe he had changed. But I knew better. Change is more than words on paper. Change requires respect, and respect had been missing for years. I folded the letter back, placed it in my desk drawer, and whispered to myself, "I don't need his apology. I need my peace." Claire tried too. She sent an email full of flowery phrases. Misunderstanding, love, unity. She wrote that they wanted to mend things, that life was too short for grudges. But when I read her words, I heard not sincerity, but strategy. They didn't want me. They wanted what they could not have anymore. I closed the email, deleted it, and returned to my writing. Silence again was my clearest answer. The contrast between us became sharper with time. They struggled, while I thrived. They scrambled to explain themselves, while I built something new. Their lives shrank into excuses. Mine expanded into community. That contrast wasn't something I celebrated. It was simply the natural outcome of choices made. Respect leads to growth. Greed leads to ruin. I found myself joining a local volunteer group that served meals on weekends. At first, I thought I would simply stand behind a table, ladling soup into bowls. But soon, I was drawn deeper. I sat and listened to people's stories, wrote down their words when they wanted someone to remember them, and even shared my own journey. Some of them, strangers with little more than the clothes on their backs, looked at me with more kindness and recognition than my own son had. One man said, "You remind me of my father. He always told me that character is the only wealth you can carry everywhere." His words struck me deeply. They echoed my own thoughts, almost like Margaret herself was speaking through him. Through this group, I found joy in giving. Not the giving that demands gratitude or loyalty, but the giving that simply shares what one has. Whether it was my time, my words, or the small donations from my blog earnings, it all felt like planting seeds in better soil than before. I realized I had not lost a family. I had found a bigger one, scattered across the community and the world, made of people who valued me, not for what I owned, but for who I was. Of course, David and Claire did not vanish from my life completely. Every few months, another attempt arrived, a voicemail, a text, another carefully worded message. Each time, I let it pass. I no longer felt the need to answer. I had drawn the line, and I intended to keep it. To Margaret's photo one evening, I said, "Boundaries are love turned inward. For once I am loving myself enough to say no." The lesson became clear to me, and I carried it like a compass. Parents must never surrender everything in the hope of buying affection. We raise our children, we guide them, we sacrifice for them, but we cannot erase ourselves for them. Respect must be mutual, not begged for. And children must remember, parents are not burdens to be managed or wallets to be drained. They are people, with dignity, with histories, with hearts that still beat strong even in old age. And beyond family in the wider world, I saw again the truth. Human nature in this modern age is tested more than ever. The noise of money, the lure of status, the rush to get ahead, these tempt people to forget their roots. But character, that silent, steady flame, remains the only inheritance no one can steal. Houses can be sold, bank accounts drained, but integrity walks with you to the grave. That is what I chose to protect. That is what I will leave behind. One spring afternoon, as the park bloomed with dogwoods and tulips, I received a letter from Emily. Her handwriting was careful but full of warmth. "Grandpa," she wrote, "when can I sit with you and learn to write? I want to hear your stories. I want to tell my own." I held that letter close to my chest, tears pricking my eyes. Out of the ashes of betrayal, a new connection was forming. The line of respect skipped a generation, but it landed true. I whispered, "Yes, Emily, you'll learn here, at my table." That evening, I carried my chair to the balcony, the sun dipping low over the park. The air smelled of grass and rain. I thought about everything that had happened. The house, the betrayal, the courtroom-like Christmas morning, the silence afterward, the peace I now enjoyed. I breathed deep and said to myself, I don't need their apologies. I have my life, and it is enough. I leaned back and let the breeze carry the last of the bitterness away. My story was no longer about what I had lost, but about what I had gained: freedom, dignity, peace, and a renewed sense of self. And as the sun warmed my shoulders, I whispered the words that will stay with me to the end. True family is made of those who respect you, and character is the only treasure no one can ever take. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.